From Music City, USA, it's David Hooper and Music Business Radio.
Welcome to Music Business Radio. I'm Dan Buckley, sitting in for David Hooper. And our guest today on the show is Ashley Capps. He's the founder of AC Entertainment, the Bonnaroo Music Arts Festival, the Big Airs Festival, producer of the Forecastle Festival, presents over 750 concerts a year across the country, and operates two historic theaters, the Tennessee Theater and Bijou Theater. Welcome to the Lightning 100 Music Business Radio studios, Ashley.
Thanks for having me.
Man, it's great to have you here. We've been working with you as far as the Bonnaroo Music Arts Festival for many years. I know Lightning 100, our first year on the farm was back in 2004.
And I think that's the first year we did the whole radio compound.
We did the whole radio compound that year.
And we've been talking about doing this for what, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years?
A long time. So it's great to have you here. And I'm excited to give you an opportunity to share your story. I'd like for you to talk about how things started off for you. Obviously, you have an intense passion for music. You've made this your life. You went to UT Knoxville.
I did. I'm a Knoxvillian, actually.
A Knoxvillian, okay.
Yep, that's my hometown, and I stayed there for school. There were a couple of times during school where I actually dropped out of UT and moved to upstate New York for a while and traveled around a bit, and then I came back and finished school.
I think I read that when you were at UT Knoxville, you also were working in radio.
Well, that's true. I got into the music business as a fan, first and foremost. And I was a very passionate fan, really, from as long as I can remember. I loved music. I loved records. It was just something that, for whatever reason, I gravitated towards at a very early age. When I was in high school, I discovered the public radio station in town, WUOT, which had, mostly classical music. But at the time, public radio was, it was kind of the wild frontier of radio. There was a lot of opportunity in public radio. I love public radio now, but it's a lot more buttoned down now than it was then. But there were some guys at UT that were actually several guys and a girl who did this late night program that they called Till 2. It was like what they call freeform radio back then, where they played all sorts of different kinds of music that you usually wouldn't hear on the radio. I kind of zoned in on that, and I would call them up every now and then and say, what was that music that you were playing? And, we'd start talking about music. And finally, one of the guys was like, you need to do a show yourself. So I started having this 2-hour radio show on the public radio station, broadcasting at 100,000 watt stereo when I was still a senior in high school. And aside from the years when I left Knoxville and wasn't around, I actually did that show for 31 years, or did a show there for 31 years until, a couple of years into Bonnaroo, I couldn't sustain it anymore. We were too busy.
Yeah, your life must be incredibly busy, certainly during the Bonnaroo Music Arts Festival and year-round. We were talking about how you promote 750 shows with AC Entertainment.
I've got a great team. Let's not forget about the
team. You also were part of a show called Unradio?
That's true. I had two shows. I had Unhinged. That was something I started doing in the late 70s, and as the title implies, it was just all over the place. I'd just walk in, I'd just play music that I loved, and it could be anything. And then some of the other guys decided that they wanted to do that too, so they created an all-night show, Saturday night. I don't think it started until midnight, and I think it went till like 6 or 7 in the morning, called Unradio. And I was part of the team that did that, but it was very much a team.
Well, as someone who's worked in commercial radio for his whole career, it's appealing to imagine getting to play whatever you wanted.
Of course. It's kind of a dream, to be able to do that. I don't know how many listeners we really had. We did have some very, very passionate listeners, so that's always great.
We're talking to Ashley Capps here on Music Business Radio today. You have been a dreamer, and you've been someone who took risks to try and turn your dreams into reality. Tell us about one of the first risks you took.
Well, I started producing concerts directly out of that radio experience. Bands would find out that I was playing their record on the radio, and a few of them started calling me up, or the record company would call and say, we know you're playing this on the radio. Can you help the band find a gig in town? I was also very into jazz and a lot of really edgy music. So I booked a concert with this cellist that no one had ever heard of, who accompanied himself and told these wild and wacky stories while he was an amazing musician. It actually sold out. It sold 200 tickets at $3 a pop, and that was my first concert.
Wow.
And then shortly after that, I helped REM get a gig that 12 people came to. Yeah, this was when the first single was out, and I think 6 of my friends, and I still don't know who the 6 other people that were there were, but they played The Place down on Cumberland Avenue in Knoxville, Tennessee. But it just kind of gradually snowballed from that. I really promoted concerts as a hobby for a long time. I didn't really seriously think about a career in the music business, but it was just one of those hobbies that consumed more and more and more time until there wasn't any time left. I had no choice.
Is there a specific moment when you look back that you see it switched from hobby to business?
Well, I suppose, talking about taking risks, it's a risky business, especially as an entrepreneur. One of the exciting things about the music business is that it's always continually reinventing itself. Things are always changing. It's a very exciting business. And if you're looking for an opportunity to explore all sorts of creative options, not just making music, but, how to get it out there and how to present it, there's still to this day, probably now more than ever, so many options to explore creatively in the music business. Making a living in the music business can be a little bit more of a challenge. But the first big risk that I really took was opening a club, which I did in the late 1980s. A friend of mine who decided he wanted to be a developer, he was an architect before that, convinced me we should open a club in this abandoned building downtown in what's now called the Old City in Knoxville. We put together, a little business plan and went out and found some investors, and we opened Ella Garou's, named after a Captain Beefheart song, in 1988. Unfortunately, it's one of those classic things of, making sure that you do your homework and dot your I's and cross your T's. So what was supposed to be a 250-seat club ended up being a legal capacity of 209. Mistake number one. Those numbers sound really small, but the difference between, being able to maximize things, it's a critical number there. It's basically almost 25%. So the club itself wasn't a success. It lasted for 2.5 years. It was a remarkable 2.5 years, though. I learned so much. I made so many of the contacts in the business that are still very important to me today. It was a kind of a remarkable time. Even though it's a small room, 250 seats, John Prine would come and play for 2 nights. Wynton Marsalis would come and play for 2 nights. Garth Brooks did his, he played at the club twice once before his first record came out and once after. He actually even immortalized the club in a song. He name-checked it in a song on one of his early albums. Those days are when I first met Widespread Panic. Talking about the relationship aspect of the business, Widespread Panic were the first band that said, yes, we will play Bonnaroo, which really got the whole thing spinning and enabled us to book that first year. So that relationship with Widespread Panic started at Ella Garou's, over 10 years before Bonnaroo, 12 or 13 years before Bonnaroo. I look at Ella Garou's as that's where I really immersed myself in the music business. And even though it ended badly, it was difficult financially. It laid the groundwork for everything that's come since.
We're talking with the founder of the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival, Ashley Capps. So you went from booking shows to having your own venue, booking shows there. Have you ever owned a venue since then?
No. Although we have a lot of venues that we're partners with and we have some sort of exclusive relationship with. So, the 2 historic theaters, the Bijou and the Tennessee Theater in Knoxville, are 2 theaters that we operate, we manage. We're the staff. We do all the booking. but technically they're nonprofit theaters, and there's a board that oversees them, and that we work directly with that board, and that board is ultimately responsible for everything that goes on there. And then we have some great relationships. The Orange Peel, which is an amazing club in Asheville, North Carolina, Track 29 in Chattanooga, now work exclusively with Marathon Music Works and the Exit Inn here in Nashville, and there are a number of others out there. So for a while I said never. I wouldn't say never, but it's great to have excellent partners who really know what it takes to run a venue. Sometimes that partnership is better than just owning it outright yourself.
Well, you've got a pretty big venue if you think of the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival as
That's true. We do own that. I forgot that. We own the venue, too. So.
Yes. We're talking to Ashley Capps today here on Music Business Radio. He's the founder of Bonnaroo, the Big Ears Festival. As we go on today, I want to talk about Bonnaroo. I want to talk about Big Ears. I know that's a very special festival to you. You're producing the Forecastle Festival. You produce over 750 concerts a year. More with Ashley Capps when we return on Music Business Radio.
Now I'm smoking into Texas with a hammer down and a rockin' little combo from the guitar town.
This is Emmylou Harris, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
Live this Thursday at Exit Inn, Bronze Radio Return. With Hey Monet, this Thursday, May 15th at Exit Inn. See Bronze Radio Return.
Shake, 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 that's all she makes, go be tight, but she will.
Also at Exit Inn tonight, Rain Wolf with Black Cadillacs. Friday, Lulu May's album release party with LL and Oak Creek Band. And Saturday, Led Zeppelin 2, a tribute to Led Zeppelin. Tickets for all shows available at exitinn.com and Marathon Music Works box office.
And she's cleared of a crowd that you could not commit, no. Well, I did what I did, and I do it all over again, yeah.
Hey, this is Ricky from the Wild Feathers. You're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. I'm Dan Buckley, sitting in for David Hooper. Our guest today is Ashley Capps, the founder of the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival, also the owner of AC Entertainment. Now, I've never been to Knoxville, so it's kind of exciting. Like, we always sit here and talk about Nashville all the time, but it's kind of fun to have a Knoxville insider. And I want you to tell us a little bit more about the Tennessee Theater and the Bijou Theater.
Well, when I first started promoting concerts, which was 1979, and then in 1980, as the opportunities had already started to expand, even though I was doing it as a hobby, the concerts were getting bigger, and they wouldn't fit into this 250 or 200 capacity room, the Laurel Theater, which was an old church, which is where I had done some of them. It wouldn't fit into clubs, or they wouldn't fit into clubs in, down on the Cumberland Avenue Strip. So started taking a look at these historic theaters that were in downtown Knoxville. And at the time, downtown Knoxville, like so many downtowns throughout the country, had definitely started to fade. It wasn't what it once was. And these theaters at various points have been, marked for demolition. But the Tennessee, which is a magnificent old movie house, holds 1,630 people, built in 1927, 1928. That had been saved by a Knoxville radio man, by James Dick, who owned Dick Broadcasting, because he loved the theater. He convinced the symphony that they should perform there. And so that theater was there with the idea that maybe this could be a place for the performing arts, since we were at a point where no longer would 1,500 people come to a movie at a single time. Then down the street was the Bijou, which was sort of the redheaded stepchild of the theaters in Knoxville. And it had, during the 1970s, it had turned into like a porno house, basically. Porno house owned by the church, by the way. They own the real estate. They didn't actually own the theater, but you know what I mean. But as a kid, I had gone to that theater. It had been like a second-run movie house, or B movies would play there, and I always loved that. Now, the Bijou was remarkable, and still is remarkable. It's over 100 years old as a theater. It's actually closing in on 200 years old as a building. It was originally a hotel called the Lamar House. It was the hotel in town. So when the president was touring the frontier, he would stay at the Lamar House when visiting Knoxville. It's probably only happened once or twice. The founder of the New York Times, Adolph Oakes, was a usher in the opera house that was across the street, the Peter Staub Opera House in the late 1800s. The hotel business started to wane for the Lamar House at some point, and its interior was converted into a vaudeville theater about 105 years ago. It was a place where the Marx Brothers played, Tallulah Bankhead played there, Cab Calloway played there, had an illustrious history in the 20s and 30s, and I love that venue. To this day, I love both of them. The Tennessee is spectacular in a way that far eclipses the Bijou. The Bijou is, as befits its name, it's a jewel. It's acoustically magnificent. The New York Times was just in town for our Big Ears Festival, and Ben Ratliff on a podcast called the sound at the Bijou mystically great. And it's a remarkable place to see a show. I mean, the acoustics are beyond belief, and the intimacy of the experience. It holds 750 people with a balcony, 500 on the floor, 250 in the balcony. It's a remarkable experience. So I started using both of those theaters in the 80s and producing shows again as a hobby for a long time. But after Ella Garou's closed on December the 18th of 1990. That was a week before Christmas. Between Christmas and New Year's, I got a couple of calls. One was Widespread Panic wants to come back to town. Where are they going to play? And one was Wynton Marsalis wants to come back to town. Where's Wynton going to play? And so Wynton, his date only worked at the UT Music Hall. So I went over there and did a show which immediately sold out. And then Widespread Panic came in and played the Bijou, and that immediately sold out, and so we were off and running. So all of that groundwork was laid in the early 80s, but by the time the 90s rolled around, those were our principal venues when the club was gone. In 1996, the future of the Tennessee Theater was in doubt. They weren't quite sure what they were going to do with it. The owner, Jim Dick, was selling his company, looking at retirement. He wanted to give it to the city. The city turned it down. He wanted to give it to the University of Tennessee. The University of Tennessee turned it down. And we're like, oh, my God, what's going to happen with this theater? And I went to him and I was like, I've never run a theater before, but I think I can do this. By that point, I had a fair amount of experience under my belt of producing a lot of concerts in historic theaters all over the Southeast in particular. I felt like I'd certainly seen a lot of them run rather poorly. So I had a really good sense of what I felt like needed to happen in order for the venues to be artist-friendly, fan-friendly, and to create a good experience for everyone. So Jim Dick gave me the opportunity to do that at the Tennessee Theater starting in 1996. And the theater had been losing money every year. We pretty much immediately turned that around. They formed a nonprofit board. 6 or 7 years later, $25 million was raised. The theater was completely restored, and now it's it's the home of the opera, it's the home of the symphony. We've got a great Broadway series going there, and then we produce quite a few shows there each year. And then in 2006, we were asked by Mayor Haslam, who's now the governor of Tennessee, if we thought we could do the same thing with the Bijou. I was like, you bet, because I love the Bijou, as I've said.
Yeah.
And so we started running the Bijou in 2006.
We're talking to Ashley Capps today on Music Business Radio. He's the founder of the Bonnaroo Music Arts Festival. When you talk about you saw things being done poorly, what were some of the things that you wanted to do differently?
Well, this is maybe a bad thing to say on the program, but I'll just lay it out there. I remember being on tour with a major artist. We were doing a lot of his dates at the time, and his career was kind of at a point where he was playing mostly historic theaters and small venues in the Southeast. I remember we would go into these places, and it was like no one cared. The fact that you were coming into their venue basically meant that they had to work that night instead of going home and watching TV or whatever it was that they wanted to do. There was not a lot of respect shown for the artist. There was not a lot of respect shown for the promoter for being there, who's taking a risk. No one had their heart in it. No one had anything at stake. No one was invested in the experience. It was sad and frustrating because you would see the audience came. People in that town were so grateful that there was an event taking place at this theater because most of these venues at the time had been seriously neglected. There weren't a lot of artists coming into many of the towns that we were starting to build our business in. That was kind of part of our strategy. We didn't really know it was a strategy at the time, but that's where the opportunity was, taking artists into communities where they weren't necessarily getting every show that came through the region. But, it wasn't always the case, but often the case was the people running the venues in those markets, they didn't really care. So if there's anything that we brought to the Tennessee and the Bijou Theater that I think really set us apart is we did care. We wanted people to come back. We wanted the artists to come back. We wanted the artists to have a fantastic experience. We wanted the audience to have a fantastic experience. We were entrepreneurs. We were invested in it. And that was really the difference that we could bring to the table. So even though outside of the club I had never run a venue, it wasn't really that hard. When you focus on we want people to have a wonderful experience, a lot of the right things evolve out of that.
It feels like you have applied those principles into everything you're involved with. Certainly the Bonnaroo Music Arts Festival.
It's certainly the guiding principle behind Bonnaroo. Every time we sit down to start planning Bonnaroo, the number one thing in everybody's mind is, how can we make it better? How can we surprise people? How can we delight people? But also, how can we improve the experience in every way? Bonnaroo, obviously, it's a camping festival. Primarily, you don't have to camp, but I would argue that one of the things that sets the experience apart from other festivals in the country is that complete immersion, that sense of community that comes from everyone living together for the weekend. It's a challenging experience. You're building a city in the middle of a field. But every year, it's like, how can we make this even more special?
We're talking to Ashley Capps, the founder of the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival. It wasn't your first camping festival. In 2000, you did a 3-day camping festival, Mountain Oasis.
I did, yes, in western North Carolina. It's interesting how the whole festival concept really evolved because it really came from looking for new opportunities. And the music business, the promotion business at the time was undergoing a considerable amount of consolidation. In the late 90s, you got the rise of SFX. They're buying basically every promoter in the country. Their primary focus is promoters with what they called real estate. That meant outdoor amphitheaters much of the time. We didn't have an outdoor amphitheater. The conventional wisdom from people in the music business was that I was going out of business, that independent promoters were getting ready to become a thing of the past. And it really didn't quite turn out that way. That's why you've got to be careful about believing the conventional wisdom. I remember being on a panel at one of the music industry conventions. I think the title of the panel was some variation on the death of the independent promoter. I was asked about that. What do you see the future being? And I was like, and this was a couple of years into what had been undoubtedly a very uncertain, concerning process. But I remember saying this promoter is getting ready to die from overwork, because what actually happened, and this goes back to the whole concept of this as a relationship-based business. All relationships are based on people having the confidence that, you're there for them. You're there to help pay attention to the little details, maybe do something a little extra to make things work for them, For an artist, that's the most important thing, is the confidence that they're working with a promoter that's going to advertise and market the show properly, that things are going to be set up properly when they get to the show, and that they're really given the space so that they can create the finest performance that they can for the audience that is coming to see them. that's what I've always seen my role being, is like, how can we help facilitate that experience? The more work you have, the more it is a challenge to provide that level of detail and support for people. So we found that in the midst of consolidation, we actually had a lot of opportunities. Now, we were working our ass off because a lot of them were small opportunities. We weren't necessarily getting the biggest shows, but the opportunities nevertheless were there. As entrepreneurs, we started looking at the landscape and thinking, okay, what are other opportunities here? I had built my business going places where others chose not to go for whatever reason. You know, Asheville, North Carolina, which is now something of a music mecca. Nobody was coming to perform in Asheville in the early 1990s. You know, first show I did was 85 there, but I really started earnestly in 1990. We built that market from scratch, but it turned out there was a lot of people in that region who loved visiting Asheville and loved music, and they responded to what we were doing. So looking at these secondary and tertiary markets was the first way we started exploring opportunities that were no longer of interest or just off the radar screen for people. And then the other thing was, like, we didn't have an amphitheater. We couldn't compete in the amphitheater business. So why not a festival? How come Europe has all of these fantastic festivals that everybody loves to go to, but there's not really one in the United States? Well, there was then Coachella was just right there in front of us. Phish had actually shown that there was an audience out there that wanted to have that special weekend experience. There were bluegrass festivals that were very popular, and camping festivals as well. Obviously, there was New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. So, you know, it wasn't totally out of the box. But going back to the model of a Woodstock 1969, you know, the idea of everybody coming together as a community and camping in a field and creating this entirely unique experience had been neglected in the United States, but we thought there was an opportunity, and we seized the day.
And a lot of people have followed your lead. There's a whole lot more festivals now than there used to be. Still not as many camping festivals, but yes, I would say that what many people thought was a really crazy idea, doing a festival at all, back in 2000, 2001, when we first started really talking about it, has turned out to be a pretty good idea, apparently. You're listening to Music Business Radio. More with Ashley Capps, the founder of AC Entertainment and the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival, when we return.
I love you when you're singing that song, and I got a lump in my throat 'cause you gonna sing the words wrong.
Hi, this is Vance Joy, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Lightning 100 presents the Bonnaroo Brunch at 2 Bits every Sunday through May 18th.
Join Lightning 100 and Brian the Web Guy from noon to 2 for the Bonnaroo Brunch Video Game Tournament for your chance to win guest passes to the 2014 Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival. 2 Bits opens for brunch Sundays at 11 a.m. with an eclectic menu. Drink specials on mimosas, beer mosas, and build your own Bloody Mary bar.
Hey, it's Brian the Web Guy here. Come to 2 Bits this Sunday to compete for tickets to Bonnaroo. This week we're playing Mario Party 64, Excitebike, Super Smash Bros., Street Fighter 2, Super Bomberman, Mortal Kombat, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shaq Fu, Golden Axe, The Avengers, NBA Jam, Streets of Rage, and yeah, we don't actually have a list of games. It's just going to be a bunch of retro.
The Bonnaroo Brunch High Score Video Game Tournament every Sunday noon till 2, now through May 18th. Brought to you by Star Hill Brewery, Mountain High Outfitters, and Lightning 100. 2 Bits on Demumbrian next to Tin Roof. Must be 18 or older to enter. For complete rules and more information, visit lightning100.com.
I see it now. It's brighter when the lights are out.
Hey, this is Wild Cub, and you're listening to Music Business Radio. Want to know why we had to start our own record label? Because we want to actually make some money.
Welcome back to Music Business Radio. I'm Dan Buckley, filling in for David Hooper today. And my guest is Ashley Capps, the founder of AC Entertainment, the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival, Big Airs Festival, producer of Forecastle Festival, presenting over 750 concerts a year, and operating 2 historic theaters, the Tennessee Theater and Bijou Theater. So, Ashley, I want to talk to you today about the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival, especially what's going on this year. But first, let's take it back to the beginning where the idea for Bonnaroo was created. Was at a festival you did before Bonnaroo?
The idea of doing a festival was on my radar screen. My wife's European, so we had been traveling to Europe regularly since the mid-1980s, so I had seen firsthand the festival landscape there and started asking myself the question, why is this not going on in the United States? We were doing an outdoor series trying to compete or at least tap in to the traveling outdoor amphitheater business in the World's Fair Park in downtown Knoxville. And that opportunity went away when they decided to build a convention center. And the entire park became basically the construction launch pad, So we could no longer do shows there. And I started looking for a way to replace that business and that opportunity. And the idea of doing a camping festival in the mountains of western North Carolina, after seeing the excitement that was generated almost every time we came to Asheville with a concert, felt like a no-brainer. So Mountain Oasis in the year 2000 was a success beyond its wildest dreams. It was going to be 6,000 people. And I remember early on Saturday afternoon, I was personally out at the end of the 2-lane road where people were turning off of the 4-lane road with a sign basically that said, "Please go away," because we didn't have room for everybody. We literally couldn't accommodate the crowd. That's certainly where I was like, I think we're onto something here. And that festival had a lot of great bands, no huge headliners, but Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, Leftover Salmon, Robert Orkeen. The response to it was so huge that the next step, what if we did this in a big field with even larger acts and really built something around it, was, for me, what led to Bonnaroo.
We're talking to Ashley Capps on Music Business Radio today. So you saw that success, your first attempt at a 3-day camping festival, the Mountain Oasis Festival. And I want you to tell us about the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival and how this went from dream to reality. You had a dream and partnered with Superfly Presents?
That's right. I first met one of the principals in Superfly, Rick Farman. He was managing John Cleary, who was a keyboard player, played with Bonnie Raitt. John's band was opening for Bonnie Raitt, and I was doing some Bonnie Raitt shows. And I met Rick, I don't remember exactly what year it was. I think it was around 1999. We had a really nice conversation, and he told me a little bit about his company, Superfly, which was fairly new and young in New Orleans. I liked him. We were like, maybe we should explore some ideas of working together. A conversation that happens a lot in this business that is never followed up on. But Rick followed up. He gave me a call shortly after. And then we met again in Las Vegas. And that's when I met one of his other partners, John. We started talking about different ideas. We did a number of different things together that didn't really pan out. We thought about maybe doing a lot of stuff in Memphis for some reason, and we spent some time there, looking at different opportunities, but nothing really quite came together. I was doing some shows there, but nothing really big came out of that. But we just started that conversation, and then I did Mountain Oasis, and I remember being out at this conference in Las Vegas, and several artist managers had this idea of doing a weekend with all 3 of their acts, with one playing each night. And I'm not really going to say who the acts are, except to say that they all played Bonnaroo the first year. The idea was that they shared a common audience, and to have one on Friday, one on Saturday, and one on Sunday, and create a festival-like environment around it. And their idea was to do one in each quadrant of the United States. And so that conversation started. Well, they couldn't quite agree on, for instance, who got to play Saturday night. So that idea didn't quite come to fruition, but we took it and ran with it. It was a logical extension of what I'd already done on Mountain Oasis and what I was feeling like the next steps for that needed to be. So John, Rick, and I just started talking about the concept, working on a business plan, started looking at potential sites. looked at a lot that didn't work, and then we got a call from someone we knew here in Nashville who was like, there's a really great site about an hour from Nashville that you ought to go take a look at. They tried to do a festival there before that wasn't successful.
Is that Itchy Coo?
Yeah, Itchy Coo Park. I remember driving around the Southeast, they put up a lot of billboards for that festival. I still remember seeing that, and I was like, Itchy Coo Park. I remember that song, and I was like, where is Manchester, Tennessee? So somehow we ended up there. But no, we went down there and looked at it. The landowner was open to the idea of doing the festival again. There have been some basic improvements made to the site that made it a very attractive site. The way it was positioned on the interstate with an exit on each side to access the property was ideal for some of the organization, and the community was positively responsive to the idea. All of the things that you need. I mean, you can't do an event of the magnitude of Bonnaroo and not have your community has to be a partner, and many of the leaders in the community were very enthusiastic partners who helped make it all happen. So everything came together: the right piece of property, a willing landowner, a community that was willing to help. And then widespread panic, taking widespread panic down to the site. And, I still remember the response was, we think you're crazy, but we'll do it.
It's sold out. 70,000 tickets, internet only, not traditional marketing behind it. Did you expect that?
Oh, no. We were never arrogant enough to expect that. Not at all. That's kind of an interesting story. One of the most exciting things about the music business for me and about life is how you discover the unexpected. And what we discovered was just how connected fans were via this new thing called the internet, which was, at least as a mainstream thing, relatively new in 2001, 2002. When all this started to happen. There was no social media. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There were websites and email, basically, as a tool of communication. When we started planning the festival, we were definitely focused on what were called the jam bands. The reason for that being that we knew the audience. We knew that they were very passionate about the music that they loved, that they were willing and eager to travel to see the artists that they love play multiple times. And they were an audience more willing than most to spend a weekend with their friends in a field enjoying the music that they love. So it was a logical starting point for what we were trying to develop. These artists had other characteristics that were really important. One, from a design of the festival, the beautiful thing to me about the word jam band is it really doesn't mean anything genre-wise. It's about bands who excel in live performance, which is important. But the music that they actually play draws from so many different sources. So you've got bluegrass, you've got jazz, you've got blues, you've got rock, all sorts of international music, African music that comes to play in music of all the various jam bands. The opportunity was there to program a festival that explored all of those musical tangents that the artists were already drawing from for inspiration for the music that they created. From a programming standpoint, that was why that was a very logical place for us to start. The passionate audience that would travel, that was looking for that kind of experience, and then artists whose music interfaced with so many other different kinds of music so that you could create this cornucopia of musical experiences to be had. But the other important part of this is these bands had pioneered the use of technology, the internet, and email to develop direct relationships with their fans. They were the pioneers of the internet-based fan club, and they were talking to their audience. They were offering their audience the opportunity to buy tickets, sometimes before those tickets went on sale to the general public. They were at the forefront of this whole artist-fan connection that was strengthened by this new technology. And we wanted to tap into that. So as we talked to the artists about playing the festival and got their commitment, both as a reward to them and their fans, but also to help get the word out about this very risky venture that we were getting ready to take. We wanted them to offer their fans a very specially priced ticket for the weekend. And they all agreed. So using their fan club system, they reached out via email. We reached out to our email list, and we offered the fans the opportunity to buy this specially priced ticket. It's important to kind of go back and realize that at the time, festivals didn't sell tickets in advance. You know, it was very rare for a festival to sell many tickets in advance. People tended to wait till the last minute. There was nobody was really worried about it selling out or anything like that. So it's hard to get that commitment. And that was the scariest thing from a business perspective about the risk that we were taking. It was like, how do we get the fans to commit in advance? So this was a really important part of that step. But we could never have predicted what happened. We were hoping to get a jump start and maybe sell 6,000 tickets. You know, that was our dream. I don't remember the exact number. I need to go back and look at this because I've got it somewhere. But I think the first day we sold about 9,000 tickets. My partner Rick said 15,000 yesterday, but I think it was more like 9 or 10, maybe 12 the first day. But that was like double what we expected to. And there was another little problem. We couldn't afford that. Not at the price that we were offering the tickets.
Oh, no.
And so we're like, oh, what are we going to do here? You know, and this was all through the fan club, and we really hadn't talked about limiting yet or anything because never in my wildest dreams were we going to sell that number of tickets. So the next day, you know, we're at 16,000. And so we're like, we don't have a choice. We got to raise the price. So we went to the fans and we're like, oops, sold out. You know, thank you so much for your support. We're sold out at this special price. Tickets are now X. Well, it definitely annoyed people because we hadn't really indicated that this was going to be particularly limited, but it also fueled the fire. And people realized that people were buying tickets to the festival, and they started buying them even faster. After about 17 or 18 days, we had to stop ticket sales. We had sold 60,000. We hadn't finished our site planning yet. We weren't sure of exactly how many people we could camp on the site. We had to stop at 60, take a deep breath, plan for about 4 more weeks, and do our site layout, at which point we decided, okay, we're comfortable with 70,000. We went back online, and in about 45 minutes, we sold another 10,000 tickets. We sold them all through the internet. We never spent a penny on advertising. I was all teed up. You know, I had a marketing plan together. I was in discussions with Ticketmaster. You know, I'd love to tell you we had this revolutionary concept and we were rolling with it. But this was just like the plan was for it to jumpstart things. In reality, we needed nothing else. I hadn't even finished the negotiation with Ticketmaster, and I'm calling saying, you know, we're not going to have any tickets for you to sell. There was no need to run any advertising. We were done. So, that was what happened.
How much was that first cheap ticket? Do you remember?
I think it was $100 for 3 days. It's a good deal.
It's a good deal if you could get it. We've got Ashley Capps here on Music Business Radio today, the founder of the Bonnaroo Music Arts Festival and AC Entertainment. More with Ashley when we return on Music Business Radio.
This is Neela from the Lumineers. You're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the music biz.
VacationExpress.com.
Kids fly, stay, eat, and play from just $249 for a limited time when you book your family vacation at VacationExpress.com. Get all right in Jamaica this summer with all-inclusive 4-night getaways exclusively out of Nashville. Stay at the upscale, all-inclusive 4-star, family-friendly Jewel, Runaway, Bay Beach, and Golf Resort where there's something for every member of the family. Book your next getaway today with VacationExpress.com.
VacationExpress.com.
But it's you I fell into.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters. You're listening to Music Business Radio.
Welcome back to Music Business Radio. Our guest today is the founder of the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival and AC Entertainment, Ashley Capps. So when you started this festival and sold out instantly, as you were talking about, it was with jam bands. Today, here in 2014, it's not loaded with jam bands. What caused that change?
Every year that we plan Bonnaroo, we're going back to that core question, how can we make this the most awesome experience ever? As I said earlier, the music business is about change. It's reinventing itself constantly. And the exciting young artists, new ones emerge every year, and different trends emerge in the business. So we always set out to create an incredible music festival. We never sat down and said we're going to create a jam band festival. That scene was just very vital and very alive when we were launching the festival, that it was an obvious launching pad. And it's an important part of what we do today. I mean, we honor that thread, we respect that thread, and it's very much a part of our thinking. Some years it's maybe stronger than others, but it's a very important component of what we're doing. But keeping things fresh and exciting year after year after year is something that we need to do for ourselves and for our fans. And, booking the same festival one year after another, it's going to get stale after a while, and people are at some point going to start scratching their heads and say, been there, done that. One of the most challenging and exciting and fun things about the festival is trying to keep our edge and stay on top of what's new and exciting and fresh about the music business and what the fans are tuned into. To me, it's been a pretty natural evolution. It didn't happen overnight. Each year builds on the year before. Every now and then we take perhaps a risk that surprises people a little bit. People were surprised about Radiohead in 2006. I wasn't. It took 3 years for that to actually come to fruition from when we first opened the discussions with Radiohead. Discussions with Bruce Springsteen spanned years. Paul McCartney was there last year. That discussion started in 2007. For us, the evolutionary process is always going on, and we're always thinking about new ideas and how we can create the most amazing lineup that we know.
How much of a role do you personally play in the booking of bands at Bonnaroo?
That's in some ways my primary role. We have a team that books. We've always been open to, we want to hear from our staff. There are people in our audience who are 20 years old and they're staying out at clubs at night in a way that I don't anymore and my partners don't anymore. We've got a staff that try to keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on. We solicit information from them and they share ideas with us. And then there's now probably 7 of us that basically participate in a weekly call every week of the year.
Every week, all year long?
Yeah, except maybe during Christmas. Sometimes it's twice a week as we get into the heat of the booking process. We share ideas. It's an ongoing process, but it's something that I'm very personally passionate about and still have a very active role in. It's changed, though, because in probably the first few years, myself and my partner, John, we booked, all of it, really, the two of us, with input from our other staff members, but it was just us. Now, I don't think John really books that much anymore, but he's got a great team, and I've got a great team that I rely on as well. But it's definitely something I pay a lot of attention to. I've traditionally overseen the marketing. That's something that I'm always trying to keep my finger on the pulse of. Then there's things like insurance, catering, the necessary stuff that somebody has to think about it. So.
I bet the insurance is actually pretty crazy for Bonnaroo.
It is, but again, we got a good team. The beautiful thing about Bonnaroo is the team. I keep saying the team. Bonnaroo is the team, and we've got an amazing team. And that team, many members of that team have been with us from the very beginning. So it's like a family, and I believe we've got the best team in the business, and we can rely on that team. So, it's an incredible group of people. They care. Everybody wants the weekend to be amazing for everyone that comes on site. When you've got that kind of attention to detail, things that are difficult become easier over the years.
Last year, Bjork played the festival for the first time.
Oh, I've wanted Bjork to play the festival for years. Yes,
Yeah?
so that was she's definitely an example of an artist that it just took a long time. And it's not that the artist is necessarily reluctant. I mean, sometimes there's a question in their mind about is this the thing for me? Is this the proper way for me to present myself? Is the audience going to respond? And that was especially the case early on when the festival was a little more defined in people's minds. There was a little bit of stereotype of what the niche of the festival was. These days, it's more typically it's about scheduling. A big tour is quite something to move around. So it's not like an artist can just decide, snap their fingers, and I'm going to be in Manchester that weekend. There's a whole team of people that have to come together and be prepared to deliver the experience that they want to deliver. So the artist's schedule plays a major factor in whether they're available to do it any given year. So that's one of the reasons that some of these discussions take a while.
This year on your lineup, you have Elton John, who's not only never played this festival, he's never played an American U.S.
That's
festival.
awesome, isn't it?
That is. Yeah, so what are you excited about looking at this year?
I mean, having Elton come out there and do his first American festival, that to me, he's another one of the great icons of rock music. I mean, he's one of those artists who gives it his all every single time he walks out on stage. And I know that he's going to walk out on that stage at Bonnaroo in front of 80,000 people, and it's going to be amazing. I'm looking forward to so much, I'm looking forward to Kanye coming back, I mean, he's another one of the great artists of our time, really pushing the envelope in so many ways. Having him come and properly headline the main stage is something that I'm glad is finally happening. Having Jack White headline this year, awesome. Lionel Richie. Lionel came out and set in for 2 songs with Kenny Rogers.
Yeah, he's been on the farm before.
Yeah, he's been on the farm before. And people went absolutely nuts. He was fabulous. So having Lionel come back and do what only Lionel can do, that's going to be amazing.
He's going to do it all night long.
All night long. I'm looking forward to so much musically, but ultimately, my biggest takeaway from Bonnaroo is the social experience. I think there's so much great music, and you're like living in a dream of being able to experience all these wonderful artists and performers. But having all of these people join us, it becomes more and more like a reunion every year. And I certainly personally have friends that come in from all over the country, and it's an amazing weekend. And ultimately, the takeaway is that.
We're talking to Ashley Capps on Music Business Radio. When you talk about artists getting together and making connections, I know that certainly happened a lot at the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival. And when you talk about the Super Jam, that's where these artists come together to perform together that normally wouldn't, and do a special concert. And I think it's actually changed music history. I believe Mike Doty ran into Dave Matthews backstage and gave him a cassette tape, and the world has changed because of it.
That can happen. And I was talking to one of my partners about this only yesterday, actually. And people often ask, how did you get this to happen? I just ask. You talk to an artist, and they're like, why haven't you ever done this before? And their response will be, I didn't know that anyone was interested, or no one ever asked me to. Most artists, being the creative, exploratory people that they are often looking for opportunities to do something out of the box that's meaningful to them, and that maybe gives them a little jolt of inspiration, but also the opportunity to maybe shine in a different way and explore a different facet of their musical interests. So sometimes it's about that, just being willing to go there, ask, see what people want to do, see where it leads. The Super Jam last year that Jim James did, that was a very organic process. I mean, nobody was sitting there saying, let's put together this band. It started with Jim and saying, would you be interested in doing this? And he's like, yeah. And then it's like, who do you want? And then, well, let's talk talk to so-and-so. And then you call that artist up and they're like, yeah, I'll do that. And so it just evolves, as the band comes together. And sometimes, like being at Bonnaroo itself as a fan, it becomes, a process of artistic discovery in its own right that it's what gets me going. It's fuel for me.
I remember one year running into you right before Flaming Lips was going to play on the Witch stage, and you were just walking out into the crowd because that's the best place to see it happen. And I just thought that was so cool.
Oh yeah, there's always the side stage and the backstage scene, but I learned from my wife. She's like, I want to watch the show, and that means being out in front of the stage. That's where you're supposed to be if you really want to see the show. I try to get out front and center whenever I can, to have that experience, because that's definitely where it's at.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to get out front and center here on the radio with us today.
Thanks for asking me. All of these years, you never gave up. So you're like us, you can never give up.
Well, it took 11 years. Ashley Capps has been our guest today on Music Business Radio. It was great having you today, Ashley.
Thanks so much for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Music Business Radio, a production of Tuned In Broadcasting Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. Recorded in the WRLT Lightning 100 studios. Music Business Radio is produced by Gary Crane, David Hooper, and Dan Buckley. Special technical assistance by Tom Hansen. With Pro Tools post-production by Justin Hamill and Dan Buckley. And Lester held the antenna. For information on syndication, guest booking, demo derby music, or downloading previous episodes, visit musicbusinessradio.com.
Music Business Radio.